lot, but because we're recording, I'll try to stay here. Again, like you said, my name is Patricia Falcon. I am the Executive Director for the James Barrie Center for Children. We are Etowah County's Children's Advocacy Center. I think you all are familiar with our center, but I do want to just take a minute to make sure that everybody knows each other and that kind of thing. I want to talk just briefly about your board experience, or if you are in the process of planning for a board of directors. I have been a social worker for 30 years, and so as we were talking about feeling old a little bit ago, that certainly will make you think about that when I say 30 years. That reminds me of my age, but have had just a pretty amazing experience and career, and the opportunity to work with a variety of different kinds of boards in my social service experience. So certainly at the Barrie Center, we have a board of directors, and I'm very grateful and thankful for the work that they've done to support me and to support, most importantly, the mission of the Barrie Center. I want to talk just briefly about what your mission for your nonprofit. So if we could just go around just briefly and introduce yourself, and just share, are you director or a staff member at a nonprofit, or are you on a board here in the community, in the local community, and you're wanting to make sure that you're learning about your responsibilities as a board member, and whatever that may be. But will you just share briefly your name and where you're involved? So, great. Well, thank you all for being here. I think it's important that whether you're looking to serve on a board or you are the director of an agency, certainly first and foremost, you have to know your mission. You have to really have that passion and feel for who are your clients, and know your mission and what's at the core there. And that's really the first question to ask yourself, to think about. You also, when you're starting out, I think when you're thinking about developing your board, or adding to someone on your board, it's so important that you know what's in your bylaws regarding your board. You all have this handout, the slideshow here, PowerPoint, and we have some other handouts as well, and I'll talk about those. But right here, if you're welcome to follow along if you'd like, make notes. It's also, I want to make sure that we're interactive and you can ask questions and things like that. Please make sure, if you're sitting there thinking of something or have a question, please just let me know. So you have to know what your bylaws say. Every nonprofit organization should have a bylaws. Of course, you have your articles of incorporation, but you're going to have your bylaws that really set the plan for your organization. It should outline the number of members that you should have. You should have a minimum number of members in your board of directors. It should also talk about whether there are term limits, whether you have people that then become like an ex officio or honorary type board member. They've served 10 years maybe on your board, and they're now in that capacity. It should talk about when elections happen. I see your face. Is that somebody holler if you see the alarm? Yes, I know. And Will's going to tell us for sure. But no, it's okay, because I'm kind of listening to that as well. It should outline elections. It should outline what do you do in case you have a vacancy. It should outline what if you don't have an executive director. Who fills that slot for the executive director's position from the board of directors, potentially? Or is that someone that's going to be a staff member that moves up into that position temporarily? It should talk about removing members. Is there something in process to remove a member from your board of directors? One really major responsibility that happens with a board is that they have the ability to purchase property, to enter into a loan, to enter into contracts on behalf of your organization. And so with that comes great responsibility and a financial responsibility. So as you're looking maybe to enter into a board, you need to know that part of it as well, that there is some financial responsibility there. It should outline your committees that you're going to have. Every board is going to be different in terms of those committees, but we'll talk about that a little bit more here shortly. But the normal kind of customary type committees that you can have. And then it should outline your monthly requirements for meetings or annual requirements for a meeting. Most boards will have at a minimum a quarterly meeting. Some meet every other month. For us at the Barrie Center, that's what we do. We meet every other month. But in the off month, I meet with my president and my finance officer, and we have a very open line of communication. They're continuing to review things in the process. You can always call emergency meetings if you need to do that, and we certainly have had to do that over the course of my career. I've always worked for nonprofits, and you know, that's something certainly that you could do. And then it should be though at a minimum at least quarterly. Most boards do meet in that way. So it should outline your meeting requirements. I want to just talk briefly about, and I know some of y'all are not necessarily on a board just yet. After this, you probably will be. But what are there things that kind of keep you up at night if you're involved directly with a nonprofit? What are things that you think about at night? Are you waking up in the middle of the night because you're worried about fundraising or a big event you're having, or something financial or staff? What is that? Or is there anything? Yes.
And I was kind of zooming through here to see if it was mentioned. So part of this will be asking if we should incorporate that in the Bible. But let's use the Charles E. House, formerly the Love Center, as an example. Okay. And so we have some folks, no income, low income, coming in because there's nowhere else to go. But there's some mental health issues, right? And we have some children in there. If somebody hurts a child, okay, what's our responsibility as a board to have to make sure that our insurance is up to date, and also board member insurance? So what happens? If you meet up at night, if something like that happens, am I going to be sued? You have a lawyer on your board? We do.
Yeah, good answer. Wow, that's a great question. Great. Given the fact that I do tons of training related to reporting, and that's my job, working to keep children safe here in the community, I would say because you have a mixed population, children and adults, that there programmatically there should be some things in place to make sure that there are safety protocols in place. Things like another family can never enter the room of another family, you know, to protect that child. At a minimum, your staff should be, any place that has children involved, at a minimum should be having the Barrie Center come present to you about mandatory reporting, and we do that training for free. Yes. So for instance, any agency that you might be involved in that has children in their care should have training related to mandatory reporting. By law, not to get off on that, but by law, it is a requirement that anyone that has care of a child is a mandatory reporter. So you don't have to necessarily have staff that are social work staff. They can have that kind of training, and we provide that for free. We could do something related for you, for your agency, related to your board and their responsibility. but there should be something in place for mandatory reporting for a critical incident, a form that should be filled out related to a critical incident with a plan for who's going to be contacted, the executive director. Do they know what to do if there was something that happened, who to call, how to handle that? Where the liability could come in, I think, and certainly I'm not saying I'm the expert related to boards and their development, but child abuse is one of those things I do claim that and know about. Where the liability could come in is if you had a policy for your board in place to say a report must be made, and then the agency did not follow that policy, you could have some responsibility and liability for that. So I could see why those kinds of things would keep you up at night. Yeah.
Not just for the Charles Center. Now you got to think about the library.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes. Well, I'd be happy to do that because you think about, we do that training for churches. We do that for teachers, any kind of organization. We do the YMCA, their summer camp staff and their other staff. We've trained gymnastic centers because they're in the care of children. So any organization, and as a board member for any organization that has any kind of care of children, please know that that's something that we offer. We talk about safety within your facility and where opportunities might lie that could be of danger to children. How do you handle, someone that might, like you said, might have some mental health issues. So, you may also have some policies in place that speak to a family, that parent of that child having responsibility to, having their eyes on a child, particularly in the mixed population that you have at the Charles C. House.
Is the way that they discipline their child inside the home, could that possibly be a liability on the house as well?
Well, that's probably a whole nother presentation, but it could be potentially, and it could be something that you have some responsibility for reporting if it was more than a normal type discipline technique. So that's a great question. Thank you. I think most executive directors are often thinking about whether that's financial responsibilities, kind of how to manage and how to get it all done. So as a board member, it's important also too that you take that time to just check in with your executive director and you're talking to them about those kinds of things. There's some, at the core though, there's some major responsibilities for any nonprofit board. First and foremost, they approve your mission, your vision, your values, and a strategic plan. If you don't have a strategic plan, they're going to help you in the creation of that strategic plan. They should. And you need their input and their buy-in on your plan for your agency. They're going to ensure that your programs are achieving the objectives that you set forward. So in my situation, we do forensic interviews of children. It's a specialized interview. So at the Barrie Center, if I was not providing the forensic interviews that we're supposed to provide, my board would know about that. I give every year. We just did that. We have an annual report that's presented to the board. And they would know if I said I only did 25 forensic interviews for an entire year, they would be on alert and really questioning that because normally we interview at least 300 children a year. So think about that when you're looking at your objectives for your organization. They're responsible for providing the sufficient resource to you. So what does that mean? Your location, a place for you to serve your clients, to have the staff and the finances fundraising revenue that you need. Now, that's different than saying the executive director might write the grant for something, but in a broad spectrum, they're going to be responsible for making sure you have what you need to provide those services. They need to make sure that they're fulfilling their legal obligation. So think about that just for a minute. The one thing we all do is pay taxes. From an organizational perspective, they must pay their payroll tax. Your board, someone on your board is the person responsible for making sure that those things get done. The board should be reviewing your financial statements and your bank accounts, and they should be having, they should have full access to that. So think about that. They need to make sure that you're complying with your responsibilities. If that means having an audit, if that means you're having something from a legal contract that's required. If you're a United Way agency, let's say, and you're responsible for having an audit, then they're responsible to make sure that you're complying with that. That they're providing the proper financial oversight, that they're approving your budget. You're going to prepare it as the executive director, but they're responsible for approving that. They're responsible for selecting and evaluating the executive director. And sometimes I think in things that I've seen over the years, and certainly particular situations here in our community that can be problematic, is when your board becomes too involved in your staffing. The board's responsibility is to evaluate the director and oversee. The director answers to the board. The staff answer to the executive director. And that's something really to keep in mind as you're thinking about that, because sometimes it can really get a little bit messy if your board is trying to manage your staff for you and to tell you what to do with your staff. They are responsible for approving all policies. Now, as the director, you might create that policy with recommendations for their approval, but they are allowed to make the changes to that policy and approve those things. So you should have a grievance form, your financial policies, you should have those things outlined, an employee personnel manual. You might have a diversity policy, those sorts of things. But think about, you might have an electronic policy, like cell phone use or things like that. You might have conflict of interest policy, those sorts of things. So they're going to approve those. Can y'all think of any other kind of policies that you've seen that might be something that a board would approve? No. I think one of the things that is so important too, as a core responsibility for your board, is really helping to improve your public standing, your impressions here in the community. Your board members should be your biggest cheerleaders for the organization. A couple of y'all have mentioned the Charles C. House. You're going to be out there talking about what Charles C. House is, what they do, what their needs are. As a board member, you want to be that cheerleader for that organization. And then also recruiting and orienting new board members. They're going to help with that as well. The next thing, just kind of in evaluating, I want you to think about, if you were to evaluate your board, what kinds of things are they doing to help you adhere to your mission? Can y'all think of some things that might be that might be something that you've seen your board do that helps you stay focused on your mission? Or have you ever seen problems that have happened with a board? Can y'all think of any of those kinds of things?
And make sure that the house has the food will, go around to different areas and whoever, giving out food at different churches and stuff. And just make sure the house has everything it needs. And any repairs that come up, we vote on, fix in the house.
Yes, that's important.
Fire marshal
Right,
reports and stuff like that.
right, right. So that anything that would have to do, whether that's capital campaign or facility upgrades, if you were doing an expansion or some kind of construction, your board would be involved in approving that.
We had a situation last year where one of our board members had an event, and it was a great event. It was, but it really didn't align with the mission of the Open Foundation. And so we had to go back and tell her, like, we did it 1 year, kind of as a, she's on the board,
Right.
as a donor. But we had to go back. She wanted to do it again, and we go back and it was a great project, and it was very, very successful. But this does not line up with the mission of the Cultural Arts Foundation, and so it was the board that made that decision.
Right.
Of course, the director had to, be the bad guy and tell her, but it was ultimately, he had us to fall back on that it was our decision. And so then, to kind of help with the situation, because obviously she's a good board member, we don't want to lose her. We helped provide, ideas for other avenues on where she could be in, who could help her, and that kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, it's the board's responsibility to make sure that the organization is staying within their mission and not going outside.
Yes. And I also think a board's responsibility, thank you, Jessica, for sharing that, because I think that's a great example of making sure they're staying within their mission, and also making sure we're not duplicating missions. If there's already a full facility in town offering that same service, you wouldn't want to be creating the Charles C. House to do the same thing. I realize there's not, but you wouldn't want to do that. You don't, as a board, you need to have that oversight to make sure that somebody's not duplicating a mission, because we certainly know we have a lot of clients to serve. So thank y'all for sharing that. Really, when you're looking at your board of directors and their structure, these are just some suggestions for you to think about. But you're going to do some assessment, and you'll see that it's really, I think, on the next slide or so, some ideas for you about how to think about what kind of board members do you need. So that's why we started off with what is the mission of the organization, because you really need to understand that part of it first and foremost before you start to think about people that might be joining your board. When you look at the structure, and again, this is just an idea, but this is kind of where you see a lot of boards follow something similar to this. If you have, let's say, a board roster of 12 to 16 members, you're going to want about a third of those to be someone that has access to financial resources or the contacts to bring in the donations. You're going to want about a third of them to have some management experience, and those are going to be in areas of financial, marketing, legal, professional. And then about a third that's going to have a direct contact to the community with maybe an expertise in your field, or that has a really good understanding, a core understanding of your mission. They might be a professional in the community in some other capacity, but they really believe in the mission of your organization. So when you think about that, you're going to look for current key donors. Someone, now I have on here contributing 2,500 or more. Most boards are going to have some, whether that's written as a policy or an expectation of you're either going to give or get. You might not be able to give $2,500, but they're going to have an expectation that you can go out and utilize your contacts to get $2,500. So for some boards, it might be lower. It might be $500 or $1,000, but there should be some kind of expectation from the board of what they want, you know, from the organization of what they want from the board in their financial responsibility. You're going to look at people, as Jessica said earlier, do you have an attorney on your board? I would suggest every nonprofit have at least one attorney. There are always some little legal issue that comes up. And if you don't have an attorney on your board, I would advise that you're retaining someone for counsel for your organization in the event that you have something come up. It could be something not necessarily legal, as we talked about, Craig, from maybe a malpractice standpoint, not necessarily that. It could be something related to the land next door to your organization and, you know, something legal in that way. A banker, someone that has the financial background, an investment broker, public relations. It's always great to have someone that does public relations as their career choice because they see things differently. They're looking at your perception in the community. They're looking at your social media. They're looking at, you know, is there a consistency within your brand? That's really where someone that's in public relations or marketing can also really be very valuable. Someone in HR, if you work for an organization and let's say you have 100 part-time employees and you know, all kinds of rules and regulations about you know, what happens within your organization, you're probably going to want someone that has an HR background involved on your board because you probably as the executive director might not necessarily realize all the laws and rules around that. Nonprofits had some things change in terms of salary and exempt and non-exempt staff and all of those things over the last couple of years, and that really has impacted a lot of nonprofits. So it's good to have someone with some HR experience on your board of directors. And then, you know, you may have a teacher, social worker, someone in law enforcement, or in the judicial system, you know, a local business owner, thinking about all of those kinds of folks that could be of value to your board. Now, I will say one thing here that, you know, we're certainly very proud of is our United Way organization. They have a very large board, a very strong board, and so they move people through the process. So, you know, you'll oftentimes see people here in our community specifically that they might be involved in the United Way board, but they also can serve an agency in some capacity as well. So, yes. Mm-hmm.
You really kind of smacked me in the face.
Oh. Okay.
The current key donor, those that are donating 2,500 or above, this is like a duh. Okay. And I've got some library lovers in town. One lady in particular I can think of, she donates $5,000 every year.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Yes.
So, and I'm thinking the Charles House too. We have certain churches in the area that donate monthly.
Yes.
In our thing, we asked them, it's like, I didn't thought about donors being on the board.
Yeah.
And how many boards have I been on? You know, that's right.
Well, that's great. I'm happy to hear that because thinking about people that are your donors, you know, they may be interested, or they may have a recommendation of someone for you as well. So thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Also, I think it's also really important when you're looking at diversifying your board. A lot of people only focus on ethnicity or male, female, or even their area of expertise. But I think it's also important to look at where they live. A lot of times we look at board members that live in Gadsden, because that's kind of the hub of Etowah County. But I know that United Way, on their board matrix, which I've got a copy of Patricia's, they broke it out by how many live in Gadsden, how many live in Hooks Bluff, Lincoln, and South Island. Broke out all the municipalities of Etowah County, so that way they were making sure that all of Etowah County was represented.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And definitely I wanted to talk about that, but I think that's great the way you describe that. You also may have an organization that serves multiple counties that you're involved with. We have a lot of things that are Cherokee, Etowah, DeKalb, or may be involved from disaster services, maybe, that also coordinate with Calhoun County. So you want to make sure that you have people that also live in those outlying counties if your board serves that population. Okay. So when you think about committees, our primary committee is always going to be your executive committee. That's going to be your president, vice president, treasurer, secretary. Some people call it a chairman of the board, but that term mixes together. You might also have, if you have an organization that has a development director involved, you might have that lead person on your executive committee, and their job is the main governance and oversight for your organization. Then you're going to have a finance committee, and that's always going to be, you're always going to want to have your treasurer involved in that. They're looking at your budget, they're looking at your audit, your bank accounts, your bookkeeping oversight. Within so many organizations here in the community, I know I experience this because we have a smaller staff. They're also looking at segregation of duties. And so they're going to want to, finance folks are going to want to make sure that, the same person that's opening the mail and receiving the checks are not the same person that's writing the checks and writing payroll, or they're not writing checks to themselves. And that's part of a responsibility of a board member if they fulfill that component in finance as the treasurer of an organization. You might have a strategic planning committee. And again, every organization is not going to necessarily have all of these committees, but you could. And so that's why I have that listed on here. Again, strategic planning, looking at the long range plan for the organization. You may have a program or membership type committee. That's the person that's going to have that direct oversight, thinking about your members or clients that you serve, and overseeing those current programs. They may include somebody related to the diversity board, helping with board orientations, making sure people have done their conflict of interest statement, or you might have a development committee. So again, like I said, these are suggestions or recommendations if you think about that. Every board does not have that necessarily. And so, just again, it's a recommendation. Yes. Yes, please do.
Maybe we can have a debate about that.
Sure.
So I know there's an organization, there's others that have an executive committee.
Yes.
And then other board members might say, well, why should I be a board member when the executive committee runs? So should there be an executive committee?
Well, I'll use my organization as an example. We have an executive committee that meets in the off month. We only have 6 board meetings a year, and then we have 2 special events. The executive committee whether informally or formally, is going to meet in that off month. But if you have an executive committee that is handling all the business, I could see be happy about that. You want your full board involved. You should never have a board that just has an executive committee and they run the whole show. Well, okay, well, we'll talk about that later maybe, but yeah,
It's up to your executive committee to make recommendations to the full board. The full board
Yes.
still has to vote on whatever the
Yes.
subject is. Nothing should be passed, just an executive board.
And that's kind of the problem. Because they have made some decisions.
that should not happen.
The rest of the board,
Well, then, yeah,
With-
I'm wrong, you have a full board.
second be voted.
Yeah, no. That shouldn't happen. Exactly what Jessica just said. Your executive committee brings forward recommendations to the full board. The full board votes. They can vote something down, but it really comes from the full board. So yeah, we can, there are all kinds of examples like that. I'll just say. So in your packet, you also on the slide, it's on the slide, but you also have a blank copy of that. There's a board matrix that you can use. Now I've included a few different kinds of board matrices. You might find information on these prospective board member information sheets that are more helpful. You can create your own. You can look at all sorts of things from age, gender, race, ethnicity. If you serve a population that primarily are disabled individuals, I would think you would want someone with a disability on your board. And so there's all kinds of things that you can assess on here. Certainly their professional background, their community connections, are they, what is their involvement in the community, their leadership qualities, are they a visionary, big picture kind of person, or are they a detailed person that, really might be able to get their hands in there and help the director on something that might be a special project, let's say. So you can see on this board matrix, this is where you're starting to think about who are the possibilities. What we do is name, different folks in the community that we think might be interested in the Barrie Center, might have a love of children or victims that want to, have been involved in some capacity, or that may have contacts in that way that lead to people that may have that love. So all sorts of things you can think about. And so that's why I've included just a variety of different forms you can use, but it really helps to think about, your community and really make an assessment for that. If you, like I said, if you work with someone, your primary population are disabled, or if they're homeless, do you have someone maybe on your board that could either speak to that, or that could maybe at some point in their life experienced homelessness? Maybe they're, certainly not homeless anymore, but maybe they experienced that at some point, and they really can bring the passion for the clients and be able to speak to that. So you're looking at all of that when you're choosing a board member. Another thing I think that's really important as you're developing your board is to make sure you have a job description for that board member. I have some samples in here of things you can create for yourself. And if you want the electronic copy of that, I'd be happy to email that to you, and I've got all my contact information. I can share that with you. I shared with you as well the volunteer board member description that we have for the Barrie Center. You know, as I was preparing for this presentation, I thought, oh, I probably need to change that, and I probably need to add a few extra things, just really even for me thinking about that, you know, because I'm in a constant state of evolving our board and working with our board as well. But making sure they understand what their responsibilities are. And you'll see that fiscal responsibility is the very first thing on our job description, that, you know, they certainly have to understand that being a part of a board of directors, that there is that responsibility for the organization as well. They have legal responsibility, they have moral responsibility. You know, you're looking for people that are in our community that, you know, of good character and those sorts of things. Fundraising, that they're gonna show up, they're gonna be there and help in the fundraising process. They're gonna help you if that's in solicitation for donations and things like that for your fundraiser. They're gonna be your worker bee as well. You might have times where you have people that say, oh, I really can't, you know, I can't get away from work, but I can come after hours, or if you'll give me all the stuff, I'll stuff your bags, 300 bags for you. I mean, that's also a way to serve. So there's some job descriptions on here related to that. Yeah.
Talk about the volunteering aspect and, you know, the sweat equity.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at kind of like the dues for the board, or they have to either donate to themselves to be able to go out and get it. But is it like equal for them to have sweat equity in it and not necessarily have to do the financial responsibility portion if that's too much? Would you want that board member, or is that just something that you think that's just not a good perspective for it?
Well, I think that's up for discussion. I might like having that, you know, the thing is, you don't want all your board members to be like that. But I might like that, because I really need someone that's willing to put in some hours and some help, even throughout the year in a different capacity, not just for that one fundraising event, but you want your board of directors to bring their time, maybe their specific talent, or their treasure. And I know you've heard that, bringing time, talent, treasure, but that really is true, that you want them invested and engaged in your organization, to help you, to grow your program, to make sure you're fulfilling the mission within your community, and to help you grow. Y'all have some thoughts about that y'all'd like to share, or anybody? Okay. So this gives you just an idea of, you know, a job description for your board members. One of the things I do, and I'll show you real quick, we create a board of directors manual, and it starts out with that job description. And in that, it has, you know, our articles of incorporation, our bylaws, what's our program, you know, what is that information? We have all of our policies in here, resumes, my resume, my staff, for my staff as well. We have our annual report, any kind of contracts or agreements, major contracts. So we have an interagency agreement with all of our municipalities, and a copy of that is signed. All of our financial policies are in here. Our board members listed with their contact information, my contact information, and then a place for them to keep their agendas as well. So I recommend that you have something like that, that you that is part of their board orientation. And you'll see that on here. Do you have that job description? Do you provide a board orientation? Have you assessed that board member for any kind of conflict of interest? Now, we have federal grants within our organization. I have to sign something every year. Board members have to declare if they have any kind of financial gain as a part of that organization. So think about that as well. If as a director, you're having to make sure that you're looking at that. And then you could even have an agreement to serve. Now, one of the things, and I will tell you, we have not done this yet at the Barrie Center. I learned this information not long back about really assessing your board at the end of the year for their engagement. And some agencies evaluate their board in this way. They're looking at kind of the big things that, to see, was that board member engaged? Almost like a checklist, and they put little stars on it, and they have the information written down, and it's something where everybody can really see that. You're looking at, maybe you might have a policy for your board meetings where you're asking your board members to pay for their lunch. Then even that's checked off on here. What meetings did they come to? Did they make a contribution that year? Did they attend executive committee meetings? Did they participate, come to a committee meeting? Did they come to your fundraising events? Did they ask you to come be a speaker at something maybe they're involved in? Did they connect you to go speak at Kiwanis or Rotary or a civic group or a church? That's really the other part of it, is you want your board members to also be out there, like I said, being your cheerleader, but also engaging the director and being able to go and speak about the organization so that they can come along with that in that way too. So some agencies actually really review the engagement of their board. And if you choose to do that, we have an extra copy of that in there. So kind of wrapping up, this just really has best practices for a nonprofit board. Being very clear. You want to be clear about their job description and what they're agreeing to. You want to make sure that there are clear financial giving expectations that, like I said, you either have a give or get type policy or expectation, that you've given them a clear orientation, that they understand, they've taken a tour of your agency. Some boards don't necessarily meet at their agency. And so have they ever actually come into the agency and been able to maybe even talk with a client or something like that? You can also bring clients to come do a presentation at a board meeting if you needed to do that. Have you equipped that board member to be an ambassador for you? Like I said, have they taken a tour? Have they come to events? Do they really know at the core what you do? Do they understand that? What you do as an organization? And then do they have whatever tools they need to help in their fundraising? Have you done a self-assessment? Do you have, like we said, some external legal counsel? And then also having really strong agendas and meeting facilitation. Now, the president of the board is the one that facilitates the board meeting. In our organization, our president facilitates that. I'm asked to chime in and share specific information about maybe something about a program or some of the updates type things. Some of the financial updates of we've written, maybe this grant and this is what we requested, those sorts of things, or we've not received that notice yet from that grant. I talk about those things, but our board members talk about events, special events, and you know, strategic plans, and they're talking about those things. So keep that in mind. I have on here my contact information. Again, I'm happy to just talk about something. I certainly don't have all the answers for that, but you know, I'm happy to process something with you and